Oh, welcome everybody
There
to
you go.
another live interview with Become a Fearless Father. I am accompanied today by what I start calling him the Librarian. If you haven't seen the movie, watch it, even just for 5 minutes, so you can see who the Librarian is. And then later in the story of this 1 hour live interview, you can say like, yes, he definitely is the Librarian. Or maybe you say, no, it's fine. At least we promise we wear a shirt. And we're
Yeah.
going to keep it a secret. Are we wearing pants? Yes or no? Definitely not wearing any socks. Just saying. It's hot, people. It's hot. But let's get this on the way. So let's start with the first question, Oleg, if that's okay with you.
Sure,
And
let's go.
after that, we'll dive right into who's Oleg Kagan, your family, etc. Right? So we spoke about this a little bit already because I really wanted to know if you knew a lot about, and of course, but to make sure regards to reading and for kids and stuff like that. So how should one help their kids get or become interested in reading?
That's an excellent question, a very important question, for obvious reasons. So the first thing is, like most things with parenting, is modeling. I think it's really important that kids see their parents reading. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the other big question though is, why do we want our kids to read, and how we make that happen? So
Mm-hmm.
it's important for us, I think, and it's maybe weird that I, as a librarian, that I say it like this, but it's important not so much that our kids read, but it's important that our kids are curious. There are a lot of ways that we can satisfy, kids' curiosity. Reading is one of those things, but the more important thing is that they have questions, that they're actively curious about the world, and then we can, from my perspective, from the library perspective, then we can actually say, okay, the best way to satisfy, this curiosity is to read a book. Another way, let's watch a movie, let's go to the zoo, all of these kind of things. And at the zoo, of course, there are descriptions of the animals, and that's, there you go, a little sort of inroad to reading. A kid doesn't like to read a book, but how about, do you want to know what this mongoose does, or where he lives? Well, it says right here in this little, paper, or this little placard. So let's read that. Start
Mm-hmm.
start there. Start.
Mm-hmm.
If a child is a reluctant reader, in the library field, we call the child a reluctant reader,
Okay.
when they're not that excited about reading. And this is totally normal. Kids come in with their parents all the time, and maybe they're a little bit nervous about being at the library. Maybe they're just overwhelmed by the choices. Maybe they're, not very comfortable reading, at whatever age. It doesn't have to be kids. There are plenty of adults who are not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable reading. But I just said a whole bunch of stuff, and we can delve into any of those elements.
Mm-hmm. Nice, 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 nice. Yeah, we definitely will in a minute. I quickly highlighted for myself curiosity, right? It's
Mhm.
something that I'm working on myself because I noticed that I'm not curious enough myself. So I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to dive into that because I think for anybody, not just our children, for
Sure.
anybody, curiosity, the way I see it now, is actually one of the keys. It's the key to
Hmm.
building up an amazing relationship with your kids
It's a key to
and
well-being in life.
yeah, and for yourself and also
Hmm.
for your marriage. So we're going to
100%.
dive into that a little bit later. First of all, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to come in on. It's early there, so share with us who is Oleg, what do you do, what's your background story, and
Sure.
always important for me and for the audience, what is your current family situation look like?
Sure. Well, okay, so that's all. That's a big question. There's what's my story? Okay,
Yeah.
so my family immigrated to the United States, to Los Angeles, from Kiev in Ukraine, from back
Okay.
when it was the Soviet Union, and so I've
Mm-hmm.
been living in Los Angeles for almost 30 years now. It was in 1990 that we came, March 19th of 1990, as a matter of fact.
Well.
Uh, and so I grew up, in Los Angeles, a giant city. And my parents, they did everything they could to give me. I have a twin brother, to give me and my brother uh, opportunities that they didn't have, or they wouldn't have had in the Soviet Union, and what we wouldn't have had in the Soviet Union. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so they encouraged us to to read. My dad took us to the library every week, and that was really important and really formative in my experience in developing particularly curiosity. uh, yeah, and I've got to shout out to my parents because they came to a whole different country speaking very little of the language, having
Hmm.
nothing really set up with, not like with a lot of money or anything, with very, little resources. And actually, I think about it, and they came to the United States at the age I am now. They packed up two little boys. We were 5 at the time when we left, and 6 when we arrived, who were always sick. They packed up two little boys and they they immigrated to a whole nother country where they didn't speak the language. And I think about it and I'm like, wow, that was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so when so I grew up kind of in the library. I volunteered at the library when I was a teenager. I also worked as sandwich artist at Subway, which was also an interesting, informative experience.
Hmm.
Uh, and I became a librarian. It was a decision actually between I was originally, and when I was in high school, I was thinking of becoming a pediatrician because a lot of my family are doctors.
Hmm.
Three of my grandparents were doctors. My mom worked in the medical field. So, but I volunteered at the hospital and I saw what was happening. I enjoyed volunteering, but there was actually a doctor that turned to me one day and said, "You don't want to do this." And I thought about it. I was like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, you're right. I don't want to do this. So later, so I finished high school. And I decided it was between being a librarian and a lawyer, and I thought I could probably do a pretty good job at both of them because both of them involve reading and interpretation. And interpretation is something that I'm really good at. Interpretation of text,
Mm.
uh, and also both involve people, which I really like. Books are great, but people are the best. So
Mhm.
I decided to become a librarian, and an interesting decision making process. Yeah, I was thinking about it and thinking about it, and then wait, why am I even still thinking about this? I love being in the library. I love what librarians do. Librarians have been
Mhm.
so important in my life, and so I chose to be a librarian. And then I went through school, got my master's degree, and yeah, it's gonna be 10 years in March of next year.
Wow.
So, I've worked all over the greater LA area, many different communities, with many different people. People are poor and rich. Just, the usual, the people that can come to the library, which is anybody, different age groups, uh, and, right now I serve as the community engagement coordinator for the LA County Library. So I'm not technically on the ground on the front line as a librarian now. I work in an office and I supervise librarians who provide direct service.
Mm.
And very interesting, I'm jealous of the people that I supervise because they have the most interesting job. They do a really great job, and I kind of sometimes want to take their place. I indirectly affect a lot of people in LA County. So I really enjoy doing that. And it's being a librarian is a very gratifying profession.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. You're married, right?
Yes, yes,
There
my
you go.
family. I'm married. We've been married for it's gonna be 8 years this year, and we have a 3-month-old son, 3.5 months.
3.5 months, son. Wow. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he's still a baby. He's smiling. He
Yeah.
just started turning over.
Oh, nice.
He's great. I come home after work and I spend I spend a long time holding him. He's
Ah, nice. There you
he's
go.
really delightful.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Glad to hear that. That's great, man. So let's hop right in what you mentioned. We were talking earlier about curiosity, right?
Hmm?
So I've read the book Curious. I can't remember
Yeah.
who written it, but it was definitely a good book and an eye opener for me to start, working. I thought I need to become more curious, and then got that book because it
Mhm.
was called Curious, right? So it
That
sounded,
makes sense.
yeah, it made sense to me at least. So I'm just wondering now is like, okay, so how can I make sure, because I'm still not there. So for
Hmm.
myself, let's start with the kids. So how can I make
Sure.
sure that my kids continue to be curious? Because what I've noticed a lot is that in my environment with myself, if they ask a question,
Mhm.
right, the first question is okay. But then come the next one, and the next one, and the next one. At a certain point, you're
Sure.
like,
Yeah. That.
can you please? Mm. So
That's normal.
yeah. So how do I make sure that I encourage their curiosity, right? One, and to make sure that they, stay curious and keep just that
Sure.
curiosity fire alive.
Well, obviously, you're the fearless father, so you're gonna delve into any of the questions that they ask.
Hmm.
You're gonna take them on. Now, of course, there's a lot of questions. Kids are always learning, and
Yeah.
that should be validated. But it can also be difficult. So
Hmm.
there are other ways to answer questions for kids besides you saying, the sky's blue because blue is a color. This, it's going down the line of all of the possible reasons the sky is blue. And sometimes kids ask questions you just don't know the answer. And the
True.
key is that there are answers out there for many, many questions. Not every question. Uh, yeah, I know as a librarian, we get asked all sorts of interesting questions. Sometimes there are no answers. Uh, so I think part of the, maybe a way to offset that barrage of questions is to say, hold on, we can find out by doing this. Let's do a search. You can do a
Mhm.
search online. You can go to the library. You could set up a YouTube, depending how you and your wife feel about screen time, you can set up a YouTube video for them. Uh,
Mhm.
the point is that the curiosity doesn't need to end because you don't know the answer to a question, or because your kids have reached the end of the line with you in asking the questions. Like it's now time to start. I mean, and you could do that from the beginning. The child has a question about something, uh, and you could say, "Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't really know the answer." Or I don't know the exact answer. Let's find out. How do we find the answer to this? And then, then they have to engage in thinking about, okay, well, how can I find the answer to this? And obviously, this is something that you can't necessarily do with toddlers who don't really know about like the information landscape.
Mhm.
But as kids get older, they know that the library exists. They know that they can look something up online. They know that they can possibly watch a video. In the beginning, you can just guide them to an answer. But in my opinion, the search for an answer is sometimes as fun as finding out the answer itself, because you get to learn all sorts of other things. Get distracted by all kinds of other things while you're searching for an answer. And so
Mhm.
I mean, that's part of that's part of curiosity, where you because you're searching for an answer, you get to see so many different sort of resources out there. You realize even after you get the answer that man, there's so much that I don't know, and there's so many questions and so many interesting questions, so many things that are
Mhm.
really kind of funky about the world that I want to know. And
Mhm.
then and I think you've probably you know the book Mindset, right?
Mhm.
Carol Dweck's book. To maintain an open mindset. So it's not just, you know, question and answer. It's also, hmm, can I do this thing? Can I build a robot? This is something that I deal with a lot of work because my staff deals with STEAM programming. So they teach people computer programming and robotics and all kinds of stuff on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Um, and so, if a child says, how do I, starts to kind of use their imagination about something, but isn't sure exactly how to take their imagination to actually making it, or has something they imagine, and then they kind of stop because, okay, well, I thought about it, but there's no way that I'm going to do this whatever thing it is. But
Mhm.
in fact, oftentimes they can. There are ways to do. DIY is a huge thing, and that there's no reason that kids can't start to create right away. And finding out how to do that is also part of the process of curiosity. And knowing that they can do that, like that it's possible. If they have a question, they can find the answer either through their parents or in other ways. And that becomes especially important, as kids grow up into adults. I mean, there's so many adults out there who, think, oh, I want to, fix my sink.
Mhm.
But there's no way that I can do that. There's no way that I can learn how to do that. But you know what? You can, because there are YouTube videos about fixing sinks or fixing garbage disposals, all this kinds of stuff.
True.
I know because I've done it.
Ah, nice. That's awesome.
Remaining
So
open.
yeah. So one of the things that just struck me is because I'm at the moment really working with every time it's like, Daddy, can I have this? All right, can I have a snack? Daddy, can I have, you know? and can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I'm really pushing myself towards saying like, okay, you know, hey, what would you do? How can you do it?
Yes.
You want a snack? So yeah, how does that work?
Yeah.
That's why I'm here, dude. I'm asking
Figure it
you.
out. You know.
I'm asking you, Daddy. Come on,
Yeah.
you make the snack. No. Figure it out
Yeah.
for yourself. Like
Yeah.
so now he's doing that, but that's actually smart. Saying like when he comes with a question, just ask him back and saying like, okay, how could you come up with the answer
Mhm.
besides coming to Daddy, right?
Right. Exactly.
And the other thing I realized is that ego comes in as well, right? When you were talking, it's like, okay, ask daddy, or mommy,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
However, when I don't know an answer, my ego gets touched, right? Because it's
Sure.
like,
Sure.
ooh, daddy doesn't know, and
Yeah.
my ego is telling me I should,
Well,
right?
the thing is, I mean, look at it from the my perspective. Imagine you were in my place at at a desk at the library, at the reference desk or the information desk. People come to you all day long with
Uh,
questions, and people can come into the library and ask you about anything. Not
yeah.
just books, not just not just the school research. People can come in and ask literally any question, and I'm not that smart. But the key is to say, okay, you have a question, I don't really know the answer. And
Mm,
what makes a good librarian, and I think what makes a curious person and an interesting person, the kind of people that I like, is you have this question and I don't know the answer, but I'm going to help you find the answer. So you don't
mm,
have to, that's it's not about you. It's not about how much nobody knows everything, and the people that act like they know everything, those are the wrong kind of people. Uh,
yeah.
but you can find, but there's so many. I mean, there's so much information out there. It's
Yeah.
you can find the answer. That's what's important.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. See, talking about ego, right? As well. My son actually knows more about planets, like
Sure.
from the sun until like whatever comes at the end.
Yeah, you
You know
posted that
exactly.
picture online. Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that. I remember that
exactly,
picture. Yeah.
exactly. Dude, I have no idea. I went
There's
live the
so
other day.
much out there about space. I mean, space is there's a lot of space.
Yeah.
And there's news coming out about NASA, and it's just fascinating. The stuff, the finding methane on Mars. There's all sorts of exciting stuff. But unless you're really into that, I mean, you're just not going to know it. But
Hmm.
there's NASA actually provides NASA, and I'm sure the European Space Agency too provides a lot of resources for young people about getting them on board, getting them excited about the latest discoveries, and explaining it in ways
Wow.
that kids can understand. So
Uh-huh.
just doesn't matter. He's interested in planets. You don't know much about planets. You could watch the same, go on the European Space Agency website, and there's gonna be videos, there's gonna be all kinds of research, coloring sheets, resources, and you're gonna learn at the same time as he does,
Yo.
which
True,
I
true, true.
I'm looking forward to. My son is only 3.5 months
Yeah,
old. I'm
yeah,
looking forward to when I can learn, when he has questions and I can learn with him. That's that's gonna be. I'm really excited. That's what revs me up.
yeah. He learns faster though. Trust me.
Mhm.
It's
Well,
like, dude, stop learning so fast. I can't keep up with you.
there's kids around and they know all of the Pokemon, like the kind of things
Yeah.
that these specific kind of things that kids are into. They
Yeah.
know everything about them, and I mean, on one hand, it's overwhelming, probably. I mean, as a parent, for sure. Just as I'm a friend of some kids, and kids would come to the library and they would say, "Let me tell you all about Pokemon." I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. I approach it with curiosity. I'm kind of interested, but I don't want to know everything about every one of the Pokemon.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I like you sharing that in regards to curiosity. It's very important. I also like what you mentioned earlier. It's like, oh, when you go to the zoo,
Mhm.
to make sure that I engage more in asking them questions. Like, hey, what do you
Yes.
know about this animal? Oh, don't you know?
Yeah.
Look, they got a sign here. Why don't we read the
Yes.
sign and figure out together? I like that. I need to. I
Yeah,
need
and
to.
that's one of the most important things about reading that a lot of people don't think about is that reading is not just reading a book from start to finish. Kids and adults also have an opportunity to read in so many different ways. I mean, look, there are signs, there's advertisements, there's text everywhere. And if a child is a reluctant reader, that doesn't mean that they can't read. They may just not prefer to read books from start to finish, or they may not prefer to read, chapter books. They may prefer to read comic books. And comic books, you know what? The comic books used to have a bad rap at some point, but comic books are great. Comic books,
Mhm.
graphic novels, and especially, for adults who are reluctant readers, for children who are reluctant readers. Look, you open up a comic book and you can get into it right away. Maybe you're not a great reader, but there's not that much text, but you can still get a lot of the same kind of things that kids get from books, a sense of narrative.
Mhm.
You're doing a little bit of reading, ongoing, and it feels so fast. You're getting through the story.
Mhm.
You get into the empathy for the characters. And that's something really important that people, not just kids, but people get from reading fiction. You understand what the characters are going through. And with graphic
Mhm.
novels, especially the greatest graphic novels, uh, that understanding is so raw and so close. I mean, I've read some graphic novels and I've had like tears in my eyes, from
Mhm.
there's certain pages that it just hits you. Sometimes even more than reading just text. But there's also, you're reading, people read online, people read magazines, there are, and even books. There's not books just aren't just chapter books. There's, I don't know if you're familiar with the eyewitness books. There's a lot of books out there, especially for kids, that have like cross sections of fighter planes, that have
Mhm.
all sorts of, it's not, it's a lot of images, it's a lot of different types of descriptions, and also some text. And
Mhm.
that's reading too, and that's equally as legitimate as reading a book from start to finish. And so not every child, connects with just reading. Let's read. Oh, they get excited about that. But most kids are excited about stories. They're excited
Mhm.
about narrative, and that's narrative or whatever, the dinosaurs or fighter
Mhm.
planes or whatever topic they love, or planets. Those are all inroads to get them to approach books
Mhm.
and approach just reading in general, because those when you I find that people both remember things and also would do things that they otherwise wouldn't do because they're so engaged by a topic. So, I mean, think about, like, in school, there's a lot of, try to remember math formulas. Like, for me, that was insane. Like, I could not remember math formulas, physics formulas, forget it.
Mhm.
But I loved hockey and basketball, and I could remember all the stats for the LA Kings. I can remember all the stats for the Lakers. Like, how come I could remember all of those things? Like, that's a lot of information. And I
Mhm.
found that to be the case with a lot of other people too. Like, you can remember all of the Pokemon. So the brain has this capacity, but it has to be uh, scaffolded by things that are interesting. It has to be put onto the sort of the platform of things that a person is interested in,
Mhm.
or a topic can be made. Most topics can be made interesting if it's presented in the right way. So
Mhm.
those are all ways to move kids to curiosity, move kids to reading, uh, and allowing them to have different ways to do it.
Mhm. Absolutely. I like that. Yeah, we just came back actually from the library, and we got 4 books in regards to planets. So they're
Hmm.
both really excited. So I have a
Yes.
6-year-old and a 3-year-old, by the way, just to.
Hmm.
Um, but they each want to make sure that 2 books are for one and 2 books are for the other,
Hmm.
right? So it's like these are my books and these are my books, and
Yeah.
then we read every night.
Yeah, that's
Um,
that's another important thing, just
mm,
reading routinely, and them seeing you read your books, or you and your wife read your books, and then also engaging with them on reading their books and asking, like as you mentioned before, like asking them questions about, oh, you look at what it shows here, like what do you think about this? How do you think this happens? You know,
mhm,
what did you just, what was the most interesting thing that we just read about? Getting them to really show that the comprehension, show that they're, what they're excited about, and it gets them more excited
mhm,
when especially if you can be interested in what they're interested in, because that,
yeah,
it makes their interest legitimate,
mhm,
for them. And then think about it down the line. They say, okay, well, I'm now interested in that. And kids change their interests, many times over they grow, but over the time they grow up. But the fact that somebody they respect, their father, their mother, uh, a librarian, whoever, is also excited about what they're excited about. So it's right to be excited. That's what you want to promote. That the
mhm,
excitement about these topics, them getting really into these topics. This is the right thing to do. Adults support by getting excited about topics.
yeah,
That's really, I mean, that's what's going to make them curious as adults. That's what's going to keep them curious.
mhm. Yeah.
It's where people get, people are growing up and their parents are like, oh, you're interested in that, whatever. I don't care about that. I don't care about this. That's not important. No, I mean that it is important. Dinosaurs may not be your jam, but dinosaurs are really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's I can understand though. It is difficult sometimes to like really you want to talk about that, like, dude. But yeah, you got to step over it and meet
Well, or
friends
just
that want you.
listen and ask simple questions.
Yeah, and light their fire, right? They
Yeah,
have a fire,
exactly.
and just keep
Light
pouring
their
gas
fire and
in.
yeah, keep it going because the moment they stop being interested in things, that's the moment that people in general start to become boring. You start to become like your life is always the same. It's the moment
Mm,
you realize, or the moment you start thinking about life as kind of a closed loop, that there's nothing new, that's the moment that you sort of start dying inside a little bit, and
mm,
it's sad, and it's sad, and I've been lucky enough to be able to, we've had patrons come to the library, and I've been able to reawaken their excitement about things, just having a conversation, showing them some books, or showing
mm,
them some websites, and you get people excited about, they come in and they're kind of dour and not really not that turned on, and then uh, you start talking to them about something, and you grab on something. Oh, you're interested in this. Oh, we have so many resources about this. Let me show you. Let's talk about this. Let's get it going.
awesome.
It
Yeah.
feels it's really good.
Hmm.
And you see people, you see, they just come alive when there's something that they're really excited about.
Hmm. And that's because one of the things I want to say is that is why the library is so awesome.
Mhm.
Because you earlier mentioned, like kids in the beginning, they change so fast and what their passion is at that moment, right?
Mhm.
So one moment it's insects, and the next moment it's dinosaurs, and the next moment it's
Yes,
planets, right? Before it was dinosaurs, now it's planets, right?
sure.
So
Yeah,
if you have to buy
dinosaurs are a big
books
one.
yourself, yeah, no, that's true.
Mhm.
But if you have to buy all those books yourself, which I was doing in the beginning, and
That's
then
yeah,
my
that's
mom
that's
goes,
crazy.
why don't you just go to the library? I'm like,
Yeah.
probably, I don't know. Came figured out there's a library like I was going to say 2 blocks, but it's not. It's like a block, maybe
Yeah.
half a block away from our house. I'm like, oh, it's really close. So now we actually,
Yeah, you just walk
like
over.
all three of us, we go to the library. Exactly, they get to choose their books within a theme that we have chosen for the month, and everybody's happy, right?
Mhm.
So it and everybody, I mean, like economically, also for me, it's
Sure.
like great.
Yeah. Of course.
Plus the house,
Well, I
right? I'm
mean,
not stacking
books
up
are
my.
very, very, very expensive. And,
Mm,
I say that as a person who has a lot of books, but also checks out books from the library all the time. Uh, books are really expensive, and then if sometimes you don't know a child is going to read a book and they're never going to want to read it again.
oh, sorry.
Although I think for toddlers, I think it's the other way around. They read a book and they don't want to read it 3 more times on the same day. Which
Yeah,
is yeah. So you make sure to choose the right books that aren't gonna irritate you.
yeah. No,
Um,
that's yeah. Movies
yes,
and
and
books that they want to read over again.
oh
It's
yeah.
yes, it is what it is.
Well, and then moving forward, I think one of the things that when you asked me to this interview, we were talking about in the Facebook group, we talked about purpose,
Yeah.
and all of these things, all these developing the interests of kids and adults. I say, I often say kids and adults because I think that adults have the same kind of buttons as kids do. Adults
Mm,
also get excited. Adults can also be reawakened. Adults can be awakened. Adults can also change their mindset from closed to open. I see it.
mhm,
I see it all the time. So it's not, for me. I've worked with kids. I've been a children's librarian, and I've been a library manager where I worked a lot with kids. I filled in for a long time as a kids librarian, and as a teen librarian. Uh, but I find the same. I've spent most of my career as a librarian for working with adults,
mhm,
and that's the thing that the first barrier is that a lot of people think that they can't. A lot of people think that they're where the path they're going in life, and who they are as a person in terms of like their curiosity or their their routines, like that's going to be it forever. And
mhm,
I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. That
mhm.
anybody can change at any time, and anybody can become curious at any time. It just takes the right, it's the right, that thing that's going to
Yeah,
make it happen for people.
exactly. And pretty much your advice is to everybody go to the library because you and your librarians will make sure that people will find that.
Yeah. Well, the greatest librarians, they're the ones that are going to say, they're not the ones that are not going to start by telling you, there's something in the library called the reference interview. When this is something that you learn in library school. When somebody comes up to the reference desk, it's not about necessarily starting by, somebody asks you a question, you're like, that's the answer, and then
Mhm.
send them on their way. That's not what we do. It's called a reference interview because it's an interview. Because when people come to you with a question, sometimes you ask them a question in return. So,
Mhm.
this has happened many times, and it happens all the time. People
Yeah.
don't always know exactly what they're looking for, or they don't know. They don't know. Sometimes they're looking for something totally different from what they ask, and there's no way to know that unless you actively talk to people. You actively ask them. So, tell me a little bit more about what you're interested in. Have you done
Mhm.
this research? Have you considered this? Maybe is this a topic that you're interested in? And you get people to talk, and then you find out what they're, how they tick and what they're actually looking for. And then
Mhm.
you break that down. Librarians, what what tangible skills we have, I mean, other than the reference interview and figuring out what people need, is knowing the information landscape. So somebody can
Mhm.
ask me a question, and whereas the search the search strategy for a regular person would be, oh, let's search Google,
Mhm.
which is a fine search strategy. There's nothing wrong with that. Google is an outstanding resource, but it's just a resource among many many other resources. So people ask me a question, I go, oh, I don't need to search Google. I know exactly where to go for that answer. I know the exact book or the exact resource to go for that answer because I understand the landscape of information. Where to
Mhm.
find, what to find for a teen looking for a report, for a school report, or for a college student, for an adult interested in information about how to help their relative deal with cancer.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different resources for that, but I can help find the best one for that person in that moment. And
Mhm.
that kind of general knowledge and being able to assess that's a skill. But sorry, I wanted to talk about something else. Sorry, this is my life. I live a tangential life. Every conversation becomes three or four other conversations.
Nice. I
Uh,
like that.
so I try my best to get back to what I was originally going to say, but sometimes it doesn't happen, and I gotta let it go.
That's
Sometimes it's
okay.
okay. So we got into a conversation in the Fatherhood for the Rest of Us group about purpose, and I find
Mhm.
I've been doing some research on purpose, some academic research on purpose, and there is a real definition of purpose, and there are real elements of purpose that academics have been studying and doing empirical studies on, and there are things about purpose that they found to be true that
Mhm.
aren't kind of maybe, so maybe they found associations between purpose and well-being, and the level of purpose among people, the amount of affective emotions like happiness, everyday happiness for people with purpose compared to people without purpose. And
Mhm.
on the whole, having a purpose in life is extremely important for so many different factors. I mean, I'm talking about everyday happiness, like when you wake up in the morning and you spring up, go about your day, to overall long-term happiness,
Mhm.
happiness as an older person, happiness as an adult. And the reason that I bring this up is because all of these things that we're talking about, curiosity, talking to your kids and asking them questions about the things that they're interested in and things that they're reading, and also going to the library and having them see all of the different things that they can be interested in. Like, they're interested in this now, but they know in the back of their minds that there are all these other shelves of books, that there are all these other websites, there are all these other things that they can be excited about, that there is always going to be a next thing. But in terms of purpose, purpose development, it starts, when kids are very young. That when you start to ask them questions like what turns you on, what makes you excited. Those are the things that end up being the foundations of purpose. Let's and that this makes you excited. Now, what can we do to further that? And this becomes especially more important as they pass school age, as they go into their teenage years, as they go into emerging adulthood, which is after 18, just 18 through 30. As they
Mhm.
get towards their careers, as they finish school, as they start to think about getting married, having kids, moving out of the house. That's when purpose development is at its height. And I think I giving parenting advice as a parent of a 3-month-old. That's it's kind of silly, but this is not something that I made up. This is something that research very clearly
Mhm.
says that the purpose development starts early. It's very active in teen years. It's very active in emerging adulthood, and parents play a really, really crucial role in that. In fact, I
Yeah.
mean, in fact, studies show that parents who are educated or have the idea of curiosity, regardless. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you've gone to college, whether what your profession is. You can be any profession, and still be curious and still be
Mhm.
interested and still find the importance and communicate the importance of having a purpose in life to your kids. uh, you know, and that purpose can come from the outside. It can come from like the purpose of finding purpose in religion is a huge thing, and it's been studied quite a lot. And
Mhm.
that's a purpose that comes from the outside. Let's do what It's important for me to follow God's will and do what God wants. That's fine. And then, but purpose can also come from inside. What am I driven by? What am I excited about? You have this podcast, the Fearless Father podcast, and I'm com- almost completely certain that it relates somehow to a greater purpose for you.
Mhm.
Uh, and that purpose developed over time. I think probably speaking to your mentors, thinking about what gets you going, thinking
Yeah.
about how you can contribute to the world in general. I mean, that's an important part of purpose. Beyond the self focus, and starting to instill that. And I'm getting to the end of my kind of my ramble here. Uh, getting when Part of the getting kids to develop purpose is to help them figure out what they're excited about and what they're interested in, and then how to actually operationalize those things, like let's figure out you're interested in this, what are the next steps. And then the fourth element of purpose, and I think maybe the most important element of purpose, is the beyond the self focus. So okay, I'm interested in these things, but it becomes purpose in life when it reaches other people, when
Mhm.
you start to help other people with it, or explain things to other people, whatever it is. The beyond the self focus is very important, and that's something that is important to promote. As a parent, volunteering, there's many ways to do it. Volunteering at different places is one of them.
Mhm. Absolutely. I like that. I think that's important just for anybody in regards to
Mhm.
curiosity, in regards to purpose. Because I'm at the same time thinking like, okay, like I didn't know what my purpose was until
Yeah.
uh, when I started with becoming a fitness father. And yes, that came through coaching and meditation.
and
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 asking,
most people don't know what their purpose is. I mean,
mm,
that's I mean, studies show that, I think somewhere in emerging adulthood, the purpose seeking behavior is something like 20 or 30%. And as people get into adulthood, most people uh, don't have necessarily a purpose in life. I mean,
mm,
not everybody thinks about it. I mean, some people don't think it's real. Not everybody thinks about purpose in life in sort of a very structured way. They
mm,
kind of move along in their life like they're on railroad tracks, and don't and they're just kind of going down their path, and maybe not reflecting as much on, okay, so how does this, what I'm doing here, fit in with my greater purpose.
mm,
And I think that's to their detriment. I think it's really based on, at least my opinion, and also based on what I've been reading,
yeah.
uh, that having a purpose, it lights your fire. It's really important. um,
Mm,
and that's that purpose. Purpose is really wide. There could be so many different purposes. And and there's so many different types of people in the world. So
mm,
and I know there's a lot of people that make podcasts, and that have been on your podcast, and you specifically also are helping people develop their purpose and helping people start to think about their purpose and reflect. And that's one of the great things about all of these really excellent podcasts,
mm,
where coaches and advocates for different things and teachers and different people are making podcasts and getting people to, you listen. I'm sitting in my car and listening, for half an hour on the way home, half an hour on the way to work, and I get out of my car and I think, let me think about what I'm doing in my life.
mm,
Um, it's really good. And then of course, you think of it, and then you take action. That's step number 2. Take action. Without that step, what's the point?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you say that. Especially now that I started my podcast. Like this, I've been doing for a while, getting close to 100 live interviews. Recently started my podcast, also putting all my lives on there, and now all of a sudden I'm getting tons of reactions after been doing this for a year now. Become a fearless father exactly is a year now. All of a sudden I'm getting thank yous and dude, you're so inspiring, and I
I
love
saw
it.
that. I saw your post the other day. That was really. I mean, like getting that must have been so gratifying.
Absolutely, I
You're
was like,
you're you're really having an effect on people. That's that's
yeah.
that's really that's really good. That's really important.
But in the beginning, you don't see that, right? In the beginning, it's just
Yeah.
cricket. I mean, now we already at 10 likes. And in the beginning, it's just zero. No
Yeah.
views, nobody on. It's like, why am I doing this? Okay, but
Yeah.
that's also, again, where the purpose comes in, right?
Yes.
It keeps you going in those hard, dark
Mhm.
times where you're just like, why am I doing this? And then now I got my purpose, but now it's also, now it's also like I'm getting these reviews back from people saying like,
Yes.
"You inspire me," this,
Yeah.
etc.
So you're
So
meeting your. I mean, you're meeting your beyond the self focus. I mean,
yeah,
you're meeting your purpose. That's my brother right there. I see this. Like,
yeah, exactly. I
look at
saw
that
that.
thing on look at that thing on the screen. that's
I
that's
saw it
really
again, right?
exciting.
I didn't see it
Uh,
before. It's
oh yeah,
actually
that's my twin brother right there.
that's awesome. That's actually
Igor. Yeah.
almost 8 minutes ago, but I thought I'd share it real quick that he was on. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So glad
So
you're on, Igor.
yeah,
So yeah.
one of the things that just came to mind when it
Mhm,
comes to purpose, and this is something that also studies have shown, is that for the most part, purpose helps with affective emotions. So purpose makes people happier day to day.
mhm.
It increases positive emotions day to day, except for one circumstance, parenting. Uh,
Okay.
a lot of people find a great purpose in parenting, but
Hmm.
being a parent is hard, especially being a parent of a young kids is
Hmm.
is, is really hard. And in that situation, whereas in the long term, it's really good. In the short term, like the amount of joy, the amount of happiness is slightly less, as a parent,
Hmm.
because of the day-to-day the day-to-day difficulties. You obviously balance out, but over time. But that's one of those things where if your purpose is being a parent, you may not be happier right away, and that's
Uh,
that's normal. That's fine. That's not
mhm.
that's not unusual. And a lot of people, maybe they beat themselves up over it or feel guilty because they're not happy all the time. And they're not happy with their
Mhm.
kids all the time. They're not happy, the fact that they had kids, or that they're that any all these kind of details about being a parent.
Mhm.
But that's fine. That's normal. It's normal not to always be excited about this very difficult thing that you're doing.
Mhm. True,
But
true,
if
true.
but if it's purposeful, if you're doing it because you love it, then that it makes sense.
Sorry, I had to laugh. Oh, come on,
Well,
really?
well, the thing is that he's changed the baby's diaper, so he knows all about it.
Oh, yeah, he
Yeah,
fainted.
if only. No, he did a good job.
Oh, nice.
He's combined babysat, and he's changed the diapers, which is admirable.
No, that's
We'll see if he does
absolutely,
that later when the baby's poop really starts to stink.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. When they start, I mean, I didn't
I
know
don't
what's
know.
possible until I had my own kids. But you know those movies where you see the kids just go, right?
Yeah, yeah, it happens. Yeah,
That's ridiculous. That's not possible until your kid
yeah,
actually just goes one time in your face, and you're like,
yep. Mhm.
oh God, help me.
Yeah, we've had that. I mean, he's our little guy's not that big right now, but we've held him. It's just like you're just holding him, and you're like do 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 do, just everything's totally normal. And then, right,
Yeah,
that's exactly what you're saying. It's like what? How did first of all, how did it go so far?
yeah.
And also, what is this? All you eat is milk.
Yeah, where did it come from? Why is
Yeah,
it
yeah. Like,
on
how to
so
work?
much? Yeah.
How do you have such power of ejection?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I saw that I wanted to
Sure.
talk to this quite well because we're talking about a lot, and we got about 50 minutes more. I saw you written a article
Mhm.
or a blog post in regards to library values and how this connects with teaching your kids and
Yes.
etc. Um, share a little bit, please, about that because I thought I didn't read it yet because I just saw it when I was preparing
Oh, sure.
myself. But I thought, hey, I got you on, so why not
Here I
ask
am.
you to, yeah, exactly, to share your insights on that because I thought it was very curious.
Sure. I mean, there's a few things that and these are things that I didn't just start thinking about, on Father's Day. These are things that I've thought about even before my son was born. I think about library values all the time, but and also library values that we should be passing on to our next generation. So,
Mhm.
I'm gonna try to remember as many of them as I can. There's five or something that I listed, and of course there are many more. Uh, so there may be part two to that article. So the first one would be the idea of sharing and the commons. So I mean, it's obvious that sharing is important. This is something that libraries are sort of predicated on the fact that we all put in our tax dollars, we all put something in, and then the idea is that even if we don't get out as much as we put in, like if you only check out one book a year, you're still creating something for the whole community. We all put in a little bit and we all get so much. I mean, this is definitely true about libraries. The return on investment in libraries, for the $1 that people put into
Mhm.
taxes in libraries, they get back $4 or $5 at least, and
Mhm.
at most, 9, 10, 11, $12. I mean, it's insane, the return on
Mhm.
investment in libraries. But the important thing is not so much the numbers there, it's that the idea of community, when you put in a little bit, the rest of the community gets a lot. The idea of the commons, you're creating this common resource. That's really important. Another part of the article is the idea of slowing down. Slow information is something that I've written about. There's a slow information movement that's out in the world, and what that means is it's somewhat in as a counter to this like idea of quick, 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 now, now, now. You know, knee-jerk reactions, like like basically a reaction to Twitter. Like
Mhm.
everybody's bashing on other people, not stopping to think about and reflect on the world around them. And one of the values that I see in libraries is that it gives you that very moment to stop, to just you know at the very like you meditate, so you understand the idea of mindfulness.
Mhm.
It reminds you to be mindful of the things that your senses are feeling, the things that you're thinking. It gives you a moment to stop and think. It gives you a moment to get really deep into a topic, and not try to finish as many books as possible in a short period of possible, but it gives you a chance to, or it reminds you. I mean, for me, the library reminds me that there's so much to learn about a topic, and you don't have to do it quickly. You
Mhm.
can spend 2 months on a single book. You can spend 3 months on a single book and keep getting deep, deep insights out of that book. Uh, let me try to remember some of the other things that I wrote about. And let me see if I wrote it down here. I see. Uh, Slow information. One thing that's also really important, especially in the world as it is right now, with so much hate, especially in American politics all over the world. There's so
Mhm.
much hate for other people, there's so much hate for people who aren't like you,
Mhm.
and lack of empathy and understanding for people who aren't like you. And the moment you go into a library, especially a library that's in a big city, you can't avoid seeing people who aren't like you. You can't avoid seeing people who are in the throes of poverty. You can't avoid seeing people who are different color than you, who are going through a different experience in life than you. And that's really something that's when people are open-minded, they see and try to understand the experience of different people. And libraries really encourage that because you can't get away from it when you're at the library. Things can happen. Your child can see these people who are who look different than me or him, and who are maybe dirty, who are maybe talking to themselves. What does that mean? Who are those people? Why are those people like that? That creates an opportunity for a conversation that I think is really important for the development of good, kind kids into good, kind adults. Just the understanding of other people. Libraries also, and then archives as well, encourage long-term thinking. This is in some ways similar to slow information, to where you aren't trying to make snap decisions at all times, and then be done with it. Long-term thinking means that you're thinking about what your life is going to be in 20 years, in 30 years, what humanity is going to be like in 20 or 30 years, or 40 or 50 or 60 or 100. Humans in general, I think, and I believe research backs this up, is that humans are really bad at long-term thinking, even when it
Mhm.
comes to like 5 years ahead, even when it comes to like three weeks ahead. Humans love instant gratification, and I think it's something that is driven by the way that our brains are wired. But libraries have existed for 150 years. Public libraries, in particular, different kind of libraries have existed for thousands of years. But
Yeah.
public libraries have existed 150 years, and there are books in a collection. You can go and be reminded that you need to think in the long term, because there are books on many library shelves that have been there for 20 or 30 years and have been consistently being checked out over those 20 or 30 years. So when librarians create collections, when archivists work on their collections, they
Mhm.
think about that person in 20 or 30 years that's going to come here and try to use this system or try to use this resource. The example that I used in the article was, I used to work at the Pacifica Radio Archives, which is an outstanding and very exciting archive for
Mhm.
the Pacifica Foundation. And I learned something every day that I worked there. And one of the things that I learned that's not specifically with the recordings that were there, was that everything I did in the archive, every mark I made on one of the pieces of material, every resource that I created, every finding aid that I created, everything I entered into, all the metadata or the descriptions of stuff that I entered into the database, somebody would see that in 30, 40, 50 years and would have to understand what I wrote, would have to interpret what I wrote. So it gives you the sense like, man, my present moment is going to be directly connected to somebody in the future, somebody in the distant future. And how is that going to be? How is that going to look? I think that's really important to pass on to. It's hard to pass on to a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old is, they're in the moment. They're seeing like today, tomorrow, the next day, maybe. But as
Mhm.
as young people grow, their view of the future develops, and it's important to encourage them to think about the future.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that's a summary of some of the things in the article.
exactly. No, I appreciate you sharing it. I took some notes and I was like, yeah, man, that's fantastic to continue to think about as a parent. I had a live interview the day before yesterday with a guy, and he actually put on his Facebook, and I really it resonated with me a lot. Um, Multi-generational legacy.
Yes,
And that's kind of what you're saying, right? You're not just thinking
in a
about
way,
20,
yeah,
30, 40, 50, but even like 150 years. It's like,
yeah.
okay,
Hmm.
what is this that I'm doing right now impacting on
Yes.
people, my kids, or even their kids, right?
Yeah, or I mean, even beyond that, even like other humans, other people in your community, other people in your city, other people in your state, other people in your, other people on the planet. When we're
Yeah.
talking about, when people talk about recycling, when people talk about sustainable energy, they're talking about making investments now that are going to be felt by people in 150 years. And it's
Mhm.
so difficult to think about that, from our lowly kind of present perspective, to
Yeah.
think about like, man, 150 years, what's even that going to be like? But we are actually affecting what it's going to be like with the things we do every day. I'm talking about like dropping a plastic bottle into a recycling bin. That's like a very little thing, but on a greater scale, what we do now will have an effect on tomorrow, after tomorrow, and moving forward. And
Mhm.
it's important within our personal life, like in a multi-generation legacy for your family life, that's important, but
Yeah.
also for humans as a whole.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, and hopefully people start understanding that. I actually had a conversation with
Mhm.
my mom today about it, and she mentioned like, if we don't change our bad habits in regards to, for example, plastic and our environment, then if we're unlucky, then in 11 years we'll pass the point of no return, and
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
there
I
might
mean
not
that's what.
be a multi-generation legacy.
Yeah, well, that's what scientists keep trying to tell us. They say, hey, listen, like, this is not something that's gonna be that's 1,000 years from now. This is something that's like decades away. This is something that we need to change right now. Al Gore was he was very adamant about it. And I'm not gonna get into the details of the science of climate heating, but
Yeah.
like it's there, it exists, it's real. Like these
Yeah.
things, they taking care of the environment in whatever way that whatever, whether it's in relation to climate heating, or whether it's relation to any other sustainable kind of practice.
Mhm.
It's real. It's really important.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to make my kids more and more aware, and I'm trying to work on it more and more. And then I'm very, very lucky that my parents, especially my mother, is so well at it. And she
Yeah.
reminds me of it, and she says, like, "Oh yeah, now we're doing this, and we're really trying to work on no plastic days," which
Yeah.
sounds insane to me because if you
It's pretty. Everything is wrapped up in
anything
plastic.
you buy is
It's
wrapped,
so difficult.
exactly right. But she achieves it. Not every day, of course, but
Mhm.
there are days that she achieves it. I'm just sitting there like, wow, that's just so
Well,
inspiring, right?
the fact of putting in an effort, that's
Yeah,
what's important. Yeah. Even
exactly.
if you don't do, if you're not 100%, like there are people. When I worked with the Topanga Library, there was a person who was really concerned with zero waste. And
Hmm.
Victoria Charles, she was very concerned with zero waste, and that's I think about it. I'm like, that's insane. How do you not throw anything away at all? But even making small efforts towards that, making less trash, using the things that you have, reusing the things that you have. Uh, it's every little effort is useful, and every big effort is
Hmm.
very useful.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's insane, but we all should try and focus on working towards that. No waste days.
Sure.
So I like
Yeah.
that. Now we got a couple of minutes. As a librarian, I usually don't get to this question with a lot of people because I got so many questions. I still got a lot of questions, but in
Sure.
this case with you, I got to get to this question. Recommend to our audience um, 3 books. So dadpreneurs, what 3 books would you recommend them to go and find in their local library?
So what was that? Tell me the beginning of the question because you were kind of breaking up.
Oh, my mistake. So 3 books that you can recommend dadpreneurs that they definitely should read or find in their local library.
Mm. Well, that's a great and excellent question, and we only have a few minutes, and you expect me to answer that question in a few minutes. I'm like,
Yeah, pressure's on.
okay, well, tell me more what dadpreneurs are. Tell me more what dadpreneurs are interested in. It's like I'm all of a sudden I'm getting like into Reader's Advisory and like reference interview mode
Yeah,
in my mind. I'm like, well, okay, let me try to like break that down into the needs of dadpreneurs. Uh,
okay.
Dadpreneurs. That's an interesting portmanteau.
It,
Okay, so
uh,
let me give you 3 books.
Go
Um,
ahead.
so I mean, when people ask for recommendations, just in general for books, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations always comes to mind, just because there's so much in that book. And my friend and my colleague Thomas Vose gave it to me. We were in his office, and he gave it to me and said you should read this book. And he's had he just passes out copies of it, and I've read that book. I've taken his advice, and I've read that book probably 4 or 5 times already,
Wow.
maybe even more. I've listened to the audiobook, I've read the book, I've taken notes, I've read about the book. Uh, it's I'm not going to tell you the ways specifically that it's good for dads and entrepreneurs. I think it's just good for living. And so
Mhm.
if you live a life based on sound principles, the business will follow. The effective parenting will follow.
Mhm.
We've talked about the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, and when I read that book, I didn't find it that amazing because I had been thinking about these topics, and her thinking has permeated into our society so much
Mhm.
that I wasn't surprised by what I read in that book. But I would say if somebody who hasn't heard about it, or somebody who wants to develop, a way to explain mindsets, I think Carol Dweck's book is really important.
Mhm.
And then the third one, it's hard. I I I don't know if I want to give you a business book or a book on like personal growth or a book on, which topic. In some ways, I kind of want to give you, a book of fiction.
Go ahead, man. Yeah, absolutely.
But there's so much available.
Too many
Uh,
choices.
I would think that I think that let's just go with behavioral economics. I would say that this is a book that's pretty difficult to read all the way through, but I would say dipping into books like Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow is really useful because it teaches you about how people behave, how people think in ways that are oftentimes immediately applicable to what's if somebody is in sales or somebody is needs to interrogate their own thinking.
Uh-huh.
Uh, how to become a better dad and entrepreneur, uh, dad entrepreneur. Uh,
Definitely.
Dipping into books like that, dipping into the books of Dan Ariely, just in general in the field of behavioral economics, uh, is something. Reading, like, for example, there's the Farnham Street website. A lot of really exciting mental models, a lot of really exciting things to think about that you can get in. You can dip in at any point and just get a quick bite and
Mm.
get something, a quick thing that will make you think for the next few days. And I think that's we're all short on time, especially you're a father, you're an entrepreneur, you have so much to do in from both of those places, from both of them. I'm not an entrepreneur, but I can understand that
Mhm.
you're dealing with everything that's involved in your business. So some other time we have to talk about how libraries can help you in your business, but that's some other day. Uh, but yeah, getting into the books about behavioral economics is something that I would recommend. So
Awesome.
Marcus Aurelius, uh,
Mm-hmm.
mindset, and behavioral economics, and then ask me tomorrow, and I'll tell you three other books.
And the day after that, no.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff out there. That's there's we could almost like end on that. The fact that the world is huge, that there's just so much to do and so much to think. And it's really exciting. It's a really exciting time to be a human being, an adult, and also to raise kids into a world where so much is
Mm.
available.
Well said. Absolutely. So, man, thanks. Yeah, next year I definitely got to get you back on my show for sure because
Sure.
it's never happened actually that I had so many open questions still.
Sure. I mean, like anytime you like. I really enjoy this.
I
I've never
appreciate
done a live interview like this. I've never been on a podcast before, so this is all new to me, and it's pretty exciting. These are questions that I think about on a daily basis, and I really
it.
enjoy talking. Obviously, I have a lot to say about all of these things.
Awesome.
I really enjoy talking about them. So thank you really for giving me the opportunity, asking really good questions, and I really appreciate it.
Great, man. So again, Oleg, thanks for being on. Now you are a librarian, so you don't have a business. What I usually do at the end is like, okay, so what if other depreneurs that are watching this, listening,
Mhm.
what if they have some extra questions? Can they reach out to you,
Of
or
course. Hey,
and
I'm very easy to find. I'm happy to help people. Help people with book clubs. I'm happy to help people with just
oh,
book
awesome.
recommendations. Ask me. Feel free to just message me on Facebook. I have a website, lifeinoleg.com. My email, lifeinoleg@gmail.com. I'm really easy to find. If you search Oleg Kagan Librarian online, I'm super easy to find, and I enjoy hearing from people. I enjoy talking about books. I enjoy helping people with developing their thinking about reading and writing, uh, and so I'm happy to help with all of those things, time permitting, of course. But
Awesome.
having a little kid, you never know how much time you're gonna have. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, absolutely, people can definitely reach out to me.
Fantastic. So I'll make sure that people that are listening to the recording or watching the recording, as always, the links are in the description, so you can just click on it and check Oleg out. And the other thing, and Oleg already mentioned it earlier during the live interview, if there's any golden nugget that you pick from this or anything that just sticks with you right now from this hour live interview, one of the things that Oleg mentioned, and he's right, the most important thing is take action, right? It's nice to write it down, like I have 2 pages of notes that I just took. But the most important thing is that we take action and do stuff with it. So that's always my last advice. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Igor, thanks. I appreciate you. It's nice meeting the twin brother of Oleg. And I wish you tons of success. Enjoy your 3-month-old and what's still to come. And
Oh
everybody,
man.
yeah, exciting times. Everybody else, have a fantastic day, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Are you still meeting up with your friends now that you're a father? Kids making you stress out, you got no time for yourself to work out, read, or relax. Can you still remember the time you were hanging out with your friends, feeling energetic, happy, and confident? Spending time together and talking about your life and your crazy dreams. You're feeling alone now, don't you? No one to share your challenges with, and you're just running around from one storm into the next. Well, it's time to change this now. Join me and the Brotherhood of Fearless Fathers to speak on a weekly basis with like-minded dads to crush your challenges, face your fears with determination, be held accountable, and regain control of your life. If you want to become the hero your family needs you to be, then go to becomeafearlessfather.com/brotherhood. I'm looking forward to seeing you on one of our next calls.